The whole thing started with a $10 coffee card, a cheap, flimsy little rectangle of plastic that somehow ended up becoming the fuse to a corporate explosion I hadn't planned on lighting. I found it taped to my monitor one Tuesday morning, the kind of day that already smelled like burnt coffee and poor decisions. A neon sticky note was slapped across it in my boss Derek's all-caps handwriting, "Team reward, use wisely." I stared at it, confused, because Derek wasn't the type to give out anything unless it came with strings or leverage. And that's when I noticed the card's number, a vendor-specific internal code printed in the corner, the kind only managers got when they were reimbursed for department expenses. Except, we hadn't had a team event. We hadn't had a morale budget in months. HR had frozen discretionary spending. And Derek, my charming, corner-cutting manager, had spent the last year bragging about his optimization skills, which was really just corporate code for hiding personal expenses inside the department ledger. I didn't think much of it at first. I tossed the card into my drawer and tried to move on. But the next day, the new CEO arrived, Evelyn Shaw, a sharp, quietly intense woman whose handshake was firm enough to compress carbon into diamonds. The company had been bleeding money for a year, and everyone expected layoffs. Rumors were flying. Nervous energy was thick. But Evelyn wasn't hunting for layoffs. She was hunting for leaks, financial ones. A few days later, her audit task force sent out a company-wide email, "All departmental charges from Q1, Q4 are under review. Any discrepancies must be reported immediately." That's when Derek panicked. I saw him pacing his office, slamming drawers, cursing into phone calls, pulling up spreadsheets he clearly hadn't opened since last fiscal year. He was sweating like a man with secrets. That night, while I was packing up, Derek stormed over to my desk. "Hey, where's that coffee card I gave you?" he asked, smiling too much. "In my drawer," I said. "Why?" He swallowed, hard. "I need it back. It wasn't supposed to be handed out. I submitted it wrong." "Submitted what wrong?" I asked. He flinched. "Just give it to me." His voice cracked. I knew something was off. So I opened my drawer, took out the card, flipped it over, and saw the invoice number smudged but still readable. That was all I needed. I typed it into the internal expense portal. One click. And then I saw it. The coffee card wasn't for a team reward. It was tied to a corporate Amex reimbursement request labeled Executive Vendor Consulting, $4,870.14. A $10 gift card had been Derek's attempt to launder almost $5,000. I stared at the screen for a long moment, realizing just how deep this might go. Derek saw my face and knew. He lunged for the card, but I stepped back. "I'll take this to finance," I said calmly. He went pale. "You don't understand. This is just a mistake. A clerical thing. Don't make a big deal out of it." But it was a big deal. Because the new CEO's team had just flagged that same vendor for multiple suspicious charges. And now I had a card, in Derek's handwriting, directly linking him to the scheme. The next morning, I dropped the card off with the audit team. No drama. No accusations. I simply handed them the evidence and explained what happened. By noon, Derek was escorted out. By 3, corporate compliance discovered he'd funneled nearly $240,000 in fake vendor charges through similar reward programs and employee incentives. The coffee card was the missing puzzle piece, the one tangible item tying him to the false entries. And by the end of the week, Evelyn Shaw herself stopped by my desk. "I heard you're the one who uncovered the expense fraud," she said. "Good work. People usually look the other way." I wasn't trying to build a case, I admitted. I just didn't want to be part of something dirty. That she said with a small, approving smile, is precisely why you're getting Derek's job. I blinked. Wait. His job? Effective Monday. The irony was nearly poetic. Derek had tried to buy my silence with a $10 coffee card. Instead, it bought me his office. And every time I grabbed a latte with that card over the next month, I made sure to savor the taste of petty, caffeinated justice. I didn't think much about the $10 coffee card when I found it buried under a stack of invoices on my boss's desk. It was one of those generic corporate thank you perks, the kind the company handed out during merger season to keep morale from imploding. What caught my attention wasn't the card itself, it was the receipt taped to it. A receipt for $4,912.76, labeled as Client Engagement Catering, Team Lead Approval, R. Haskins. I stared at the flimsy piece of paper, reading the absurd total again and again. I worked in compliance. Nothing gets past me, not missing signatures, not false reimbursements, and definitely not fraudulent catering claims that cost more than my monthly rent. My boss, Richard Haskins, however, he seemed to think he was untouchable. Ever since our old CEO retired, Richard had strutted around like he was next in line to the throne. The man could barely approve a PTO request correctly, yet he bragged about guiding strategy. So when I found a receipt that screamed fraud on his desk, in plain sight, I snapped a picture. Not out of revenge. Out of instinct. Years of auditing had wired my brain to grab evidence before asking questions. The next morning, everything in the office changed. The new CEO arrived, unannounced. Nobody expected the board to move so fast, but after the acquisition deal tanked last quarter, leadership had become a revolving door. Her name was Emery Frost, and she had the expression of someone who could smell lies the way a shark smells blood in water. She called for department reviews, one by one. When she reached ours, Richard nearly tripped over himself trying to shake her hand. He turned on his oily charm, speaking as if he personally built the company brick by brick. I sat in the corner, taking notes, waiting for the meeting to end so I could escape the second-hand embarrassment of it all. But then the CEO asked for expense transparency reports from the last 6 months. Richard froze. Literally froze, like someone had unplugged him. "I'll have my analyst prepare that," he said, jerking his head toward me. "We've been optimizing processes." I didn't move. Because I already knew he'd deleted half the logs last week. Claimed it was part of streamlining the system. In reality, he just wiped clean anything that recorded his creative accounting. "Actually," the CEO said, turning her sharp gaze toward me, "why don't you walk me through your workflow? I want to understand how your team manages documentation." Richard's face went sheet white. He knew. Emery Frost wasn't making conversation. She was hunting. So I pulled out my notebook, the one where I keep physical copies of digital trails. The one Richard always mocked me for. Old school paranoia, he called it. I flipped to the page with the taped receipt, the $4,912 catering fraud, and the $10 coffee card, still attached like a bookmark. "Funny thing," I said mildly. "I found this yesterday." It was approved under Richard's ID. Richard lunged forward. That's a mistake. An accounting glitch." Emery leaned in. "Is that so?" I kept going. Calm. Methodical. "We don't have a client, partner, or internal team that could justify this cost. And according to the timestamp, this was filed at 2:17 p.m. last Friday." Richard swallowed hard. "Yes, well, I was in meetings all day." I tapped the coffee card. "No, sir. You were at Café Lumen, using this to buy yourself a caramel latte." Silence detonated across the room. The CEO reached out her hand. I gave her the notebook. She skimmed it faster than anyone I'd ever seen, stopping only to take photos with her phone. When she finished, she sat back, laced her fingers, and smiled, coldly. "Mr. Haskins," she said, "please wait outside." He sputtered, "But, CEO Frost, this is being blown out of, outside." The door clicked behind him. Then she turned to me. "Tell me everything." And for the first time in my entire 5 years under Richard Haskins, I talked freely. He didn't even try to hide it. That was the part that stunned me the most. My boss, Todd, director of operations, self-appointed workplace visionary, actually smirked as he handed me the disciplinary write-up accusing me of unauthorized company expenses. The expense? A $10 coffee gift card I'd bought for our warehouse team after they pulled a miracle shift to fix his scheduling disaster. "It's not about the money," he'd said, adjusting his overpriced cufflinks. "It's about integrity, and frankly, you just don't show leadership potential." That line stuck in my head like a splinter. I'd spent 5 years covering for him, building dashboards he took credit for, handling vendor calls he ignored, smoothing over conflicts he caused. And this was the thanks, throwing me under the bus for $10 while he siphoned tens of thousands through client dinners that suspiciously looked like personal dates and questionable team development retreats with only one attendee, himself. I wasn't angry. I was done. The universe must have sensed it, because 2 days later the new CEO arrived, Elaine Winters, an operations sharpshooter known for turning companies inside out and making fraudsters evaporate. She scheduled one-on-ones with every department head and key staff member to get an honest lay of the land. Todd strutted into his meeting with her like a peacock in a suit. I walked in right after him. I didn't think a $10 coffee card would be the thing that finally cracked the shell around my boss's empire of petty fraud, but that's exactly how it started. It was one of those cold, gray Tuesdays where the office lights felt too bright and everyone walked around like NPCs in an underfunded simulation. I stopped by the break room to grab a quick coffee before the morning stand-up, opened the cabinet where we kept the K-cups, and there it was. A gift card. My gift card. The one the company had given me during Employee Appreciation Week, stuffed into a cheap envelope with my name printed wrong. Except this one was missing the little sticker covering the code. And the balance, when I checked it the night before, had gone from $10 to $0. Someone used it. I stared at it for a long, slow moment, feeling ridiculous for caring. It was just $10. But something about the way it was tucked back into the cabinet, as if whoever stole it expected no one to look twice, lodged itself under my ribs. And then, like fate had a dark sense of humor, my boss, Darren, swaggered past holding a steaming cup from the exact coffee shop the card was from. Darren, who made $310,000 a year and lectured us weekly about team accountability. Darren, who once wrote me up for spiraling binding the wrong way on a report. "Morning," he said, sipping his latte. "Some of us like to treat ourselves." Something in his tone, smug, dismissive, delighted with himself, clicked a switch. I opened my laptop, logged into the finance dashboard, and pulled the expense records for the quarter. There it was. A charge from the same coffee shop, timestamped at 8:12 p.m. the night before. Labeled as Client Reconciliation Meeting, Beverage. A meeting that never existed. $10 wasn't the issue. The issue was the 39 other charges, all billed as client meals, vendor hospitality, operational needs, all neatly expensed under his department code. I followed the timestamps. They matched perfectly with nights he left early, lunches he took alone, and 3 weekends he'd claimed he was traveling for company work. It totaled just under $14,000. The kind of number small enough to hide. The kind big enough to sink a career. I documented everything, built a timeline, and cross-checked the receipts. I didn't tell HR. I didn't tell finance. Instead, I waited for the perfect moment. And it came faster than expected. The next Monday, the new CEO, brought in to restore financial integrity, called an all-hands meeting. Darren sat in the front row, smiling like a golden retriever who thought he'd mastered quantum physics. He'd been bragging all week that she was his kind of executive, which meant someone gullible enough to buy his slick talk. When she opened the floor for questions about budget transparency, I raised my hand. "Hi. Quick thing," I said. "I'd like to share an example of how small inconsistencies can hide bigger issues." Darren's smile cracked. I walked to the front, plugged in my laptop, and pulled up a single image, the coffee shop receipt for $10. "This is a minor fraudulent expense," I said calmly. "But it led to this." Slide change. Every fraudulent charge. Every timestamp. Every pattern. The room went silent, except for Darren whispering this is out of context like a prayer. The new CEO looked at him. Really looked at him. And I saw the moment she realized he wasn't a leader, just a parasite with a good haircut. "Darren," she asked quietly, "is there anything you'd like to explain before we proceed?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Security escorted him out 15 minutes later. But the best part? As he passed me, still red-faced and sputtering, he snarled, "Over $10? Really?" I smiled. "It was never about the card," I said. "It was about the character." And for the first time in years, my coffee actually tasted great. The irony was that the whole plan could have worked if my boss hadn't been addicted to free perks and sloppy shortcuts. By Monday morning, the coffee cart incident had already snowballed into something bigger than either of us expected. HR was rattled. Finance was agitated. The new CEO was curious. And my boss? He was sweating through the $300 dress shirts he bought with corporate points he wasn't supposed to have. By midweek, the investigation team quietly invited me to a clarification meeting. Not an interrogation. Not a disciplinary session. A clarification, the kind of meeting where the walls seem to lean in, and the silence is just a countdown timer. The new CEO sat at the head of the table, hands folded neatly, gaze steady. "We're reviewing expense anomalies," she said. "Yours caught our attention, but," she tapped the folder lightly, "it led us to something else." My boss shifted in his seat like a kid trying to hide a cheat sheet. They pulled up spreadsheets, color-coded, time-stamped, painfully clear. My $10 coffee card reimbursement request wasn't the issue. It was the breadcrumb trail it revealed: months of inflated client dinners my boss never attended, rideshare charges from cities he hadn't visited, software trial extensions funneled into personal subscriptions, and even a suspiciously large office morale purchase that turned out to be a Peloton delivered to his house. The CEO let the numbers hang in the air. "Do you have anything to add?" she asked him. He stammered. Deflected. Blamed interns. Blamed old policy. Blamed the transition period. Blamed anything within reach. But the CEO wasn't looking for excuses, she was taking notes. She dismissed him gently, like someone shooing a pet away from the dinner table. "Thank you," she said with the soft finality of someone who already knows the ending. He left with the unsteady walk of a man who knew he'd just watched the ground beneath him collapse. When the door closed, the CEO turned to me. "You've been here 13 years, correct?" I nodded. "And your record is spotless." Another nod. She paused, then lowered her voice the way leaders do when they're about to test someone's integrity. "Tell me honestly, did you suspect any of this before the card incident?" I didn't want to throw anyone under the bus. But I also wasn't going to protect someone who'd used his position like a personal ATM. I suspected something was off, I said carefully. But your arrival is what made it safe for things to come to light. She watched me for a long moment, weighing the words. Then she closed the folder. I appreciate your professionalism, she said. And your patience. This company needs more people who operate the way you do. The next morning, my boss's office was empty, desk cleared, nameplate gone, HR whispering behind closed doors. No farewell email. No apology. Just silence where ego used to be. And by Friday, a neatly formatted memo arrived in my inbox, effective immediately. You were promoted to senior operations lead. Compensation adjusted accordingly. Your new project oversight begins Monday. At the bottom, a handwritten note from the CEO, good catch. Next time the company buys coffee, it's on me. By Monday morning, the office was vibrating with a kind of nervous electricity, half gossip, half dread. The new CEO had scheduled an all-hands meeting for 9 a.m. sharp, and every manager who'd ever signed off on anything vaguely shady was suddenly reviewing their expense logs like they were studying for the bar exam. I walked in like it was any other day, coffee in hand, taking the same seat in the fourth row. My former boss, Parker, sat up front beside the leadership team, sweating through his dress shirt like a man waiting for a verdict. The CEO stepped up to the mic with a calm, deadly sort of energy, the kind that tells you she already knows every answer to every question she's about to ask. Over the past week, she began, I've been reviewing financial behavior across all divisions. She flipped to the next slide. A wall of numbers. Patterns. Red flags. And then, my tiny $10 coffee card receipt. This, she said, tapping the screen, is what started the audit. Every head in the room swiveled toward me. I just gave a small shrug. The CEO continued. This employee documented a discrepancy, a small one, easily dismissed, but consistent. And because of that, we uncovered a pattern of fraudulent reimbursements across multiple quarters. Then she nodded to security. 2 officers walked to the front of the room. Parker stood up, hands trembling. This is a mistake. I can explain, but the CEO cut him off cleanly. You'll have that opportunity. With the auditors. And federal investigators. The room went silent as he was escorted out, his ID badge dangling from his hand like a broken pendant. When the doors closed, the CEO turned back to the team. Integrity doesn't come from big gestures, she said. It comes from the smallest decisions. And someone here understood that. Her eyes landed on me. Oh boy. See me after the meeting, she said with a faint, appreciative smile. The meeting adjourned. People swarmed me with whispers. What did you do? How did you know? Did you set him up? I didn't say much. I'd lived long enough in the corporate world to know you never brag about the win. You just let it land. When I met with the CEO in her office, she gestured to a chair. Your attention to detail saved us millions, she said. But more importantly, it showed me exactly the kind of leadership this company actually needs. I nodded slowly. I was just doing the job. No, she said. You were doing it right. She slid a promotion letter across the desk. A real one. A deserved one. Better title, better pay, better authority, N0 Parker. You up for the role? She asked. I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. As I walked out, I finally allowed myself a small grin. All that over a $10 coffee card. It's funny how corporate empires don't fall from scandals, they fall from the little things no one thinks matter. Except I noticed. And this time, noticing changed everything.